What would you say to your 12-year-old self? This simple yet profound question has sent me on a journey back to childhood to find healing for today. I'm Mike Nicholson, a lifelong educator with over 25 years devoted to young minds. I'm here to celebrate those dedicated to the service of young people and to delve into how they navigate their personal healing amidst the childhood pain they witness in their daily lives. Together, we forge actionable steps to kickstart the healing journey for the young people of today. Join me as I speak with teachers, mental health professionals, coaches, and more, and uncover the wisdom they would share with their 12-year-old selves. Together, we strive to build a foundation for healing that many of us never had. So what would you say to your 12-year-old self? A special note before starting, this podcast is in no way intended to take the place of any kind of mental health assistance. We are simply having discussions about healing and learning and growing. If you need mental health attention, please seek a professional. This episode contains conversations about suicide and sexual abuse. My guest today is Michael Belh. As a youth, Michael experienced adverse childhood experiences. He would struggle in life socially and emotionally. He was able to rise above his environment into an empowering teacher and speaker who inspires and instructs students, teachers, and leaders on how to take control of their lives. His mantra is relentless pursuit, resilience, and sweat equity. Michael's story has taken him from tragedy to triumph. He has persevered through a childhood of domestic violence, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. He would end up in jail by the end of his freshman year of high school. Michael excelled at high school sports and earned a full athletic scholarship to Rutgers University to play football. While at Rutgers, he was also a member of the wrestling team, participating in 2 Division I sports. He went on to obtain his bachelor's and master's degree in special education. Today, Michael has transformed himself from a 305-pound football player and competitive eater to a 175-pound triathlete and marathon runner, and is looking forward to competing in ultramarathons in the near future. He competes regularly in Ironman triathlons, half marathons, short distance triathlons, and running races of all distances. The Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and 26.2-mile run. He has qualified for the Ironman World Championships and the Ironman 70.3 World Championships. So I wasn't really sure what to expect when I first met with Mike. I was just told that he was, his story was great and compelling. I trust my friend Danielle who recommended him. And I was told he was very intense. And that was clear, I think, early on. But it wasn't what I thought. I was just, I don't know what I was expecting. It was probably my own preconceived notions of what somebody who's intense is. But what ended up happening was a really, really nice conversation. And a lot of vulnerability on his part, especially. And I thank him for that in advance because he shared quite a bit that he also shares when he does motivational speaking and things like that. But I really, really enjoyed this conversation. The thought of the things that this guy went through as a young person and the way his story is such that he turned it around in such a way that is so inspiring to me. And he just says certain things that just resonate with me. And he talks about being inspired and driven, and you can be inspired as all you want, but if you're not driven to do something, it doesn't matter. He talks about goals a lot. He talks about constantly moving forward. But one of my favorite parts of the conversation, he makes this great analogy for what it's like to be somebody who lives with all this trauma, but also tries to live in the present today. Because it's one of those things that I kind of wrestle with in my own life about honoring where I come from and knowing that everything made me who I am, but also living in the present. And he had such a great answer for that. So I can't wait for you all to hear this. So without any further ado, here's Mike Belh. Mike Belh, welcome to your 12-year-old self. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you very much, Mike, for having me here.
I heard a lot about you, or a little bit about you, through my friend Danielle, who who's kind of hooked us up, and I'm thankful to her. But I want to start by asking you very simply, Tell me about your life at 12 years old. Where were you living? What was it like? What was life like? Let's hear it.
12 years old, at specifically this time of the year, I was living in Paulsboro, New Jersey, and living with my mother and two brothers, getting ready for baseball season in the sixth grade. And a lot of trauma from my past that was there at most of the time, but nobody really knew a lot about that.
Okay.
To be quite honest with you, nobody outside my house, and even people in my house didn't know everything about that.
What this trauma you speak of, you can be as vulnerable as you want. Is it something that had been going? Is it something that was happening on a regular basis? Was it a one-time thing? Was it, you mentioned your ACEs score in something, I forget what I read of yours. And so was it something just from early on, you were just surrounded by trauma?
Correct. When I was 6 years old, I lived in a house where I had been sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, neglected physically and emotionally. And usually when there's those type of abuses, you get the physical neglect and emotional neglect with it.
Right.
And then lived in a house with alcohol and drugs. Someone had been to jail. There's mental health issues. So a lot of different things going on in the house that were affecting me as a kid, and not really having a father in the picture added to the trauma and problems.
Yeah. You were somebody who just was raised by a single mom then with two brothers and apparently other people around too. And let me just say it for what it's worth. I'm sorry that happened to you. But nobody knew, you said when you were 12 years old, nobody knew.
No, there was the sexual abuse. No one knew, but the physical stuff and the domestic violence. I mean, the breaking point when I was a little kid, I was woken up to stepdad trying to kill my mom, fighting in the kitchen, and I had to stab my stepdad in the back with a steak knife to be honest with you, to get him off of her. And we end up homeless, moving around. Before I ended up in Paulsboro, probably lived in like 10 different places, but never got any type of counseling, living in a shelter in Camden, end up in Paulsboro, first grade. And when you move and those things are going on, you don't necessarily arrive with a post-it on your forehead saying, hey, these things happen. So it was, I think no one in the household getting any type of treatment whatsoever. I think everybody was dealing with trauma in their own ways.
Yeah. How old were you, Mike, when that incident happened with your mother and your stepfather?
I was 6 years old. Was six and seven because we arrived in Paulsboro. School had already been going on, and I arrived in first grade.
This is why, and I'm not trying to project my own pain but that's a lot, right? And this is why I started this podcast, because I worked as a school administrator and a teacher in public schools for 20 some years. And especially as an administrator, I always called it my proximity to pain, right? The proximity to pain that I had with young people every day when they came in, it was that. And I try to explain that to people over the years, like the stuff that I saw and the stuff that I saw young people coming from is just devastating. And it's really why I started this, because what we're going to start talking about eventually is when you're constantly facing that little kid and every young person that you meet, you're still trying to heal that kid. And for me, I realized after I retired a couple years ago, I realized that that took a toll on me to do that, to be in that setting of a school working with young people who were dealing with the traumas that I dealt with as well. So I just wanted to point out, this is why I started this. This conversation to me is so intriguing.
Yeah, grades like in the first through, to be honest with you, up till 12, got into a lot of fights. Definitely missed a ton of school. My mom was a waitress, And to be honest with you, she was trying to raise 4 kids.
Four
You
kids.
know, economically disadvantaged, that's another like ace in there. But I had all 10 aces at the age of 6. And I know the statistics on it, but back to the school thing, it was a struggle. I was traumatized. I never told anybody about all those things until 2011. To be quite honest with you, there were people had asked, hey, they always say the thing, hey, well, what's wrong with you? No one ever really asked me what happened to you. But first through 6, I had principals like yourself. I remember a principal one time drove me home. I had gotten into a fight, and I just told my mom, hey, he's a good kid, blah blah blah, but always getting in trouble with fighting and stuff like that. Plus, I was missing a lot of school days, so I was behind academically up to this point at 12 years old.
Which adds to the stress even more. Because then you walk into a classroom and your own, that's a cycle, because students who feel lost at school are the ones who are acting out, right? The ones who feel less than academically or whatever. So I could just see that being off. So you spent the rest of your school career in Paulsboro.
Correct. And kids get triggered from different things. Later on down the road, the Jerry Sandusky thing at Penn State thing kind of made me come out with my story to different people. But as a little kid, try eating a dinner without a knife. Every time that I saw a knife, that took me back to that moment. I mean,
Wow.
people really don't think about that. And I said, every time I ate, didn't matter if it was a plastic knife, regular knife, when I looked at that knife, that event went back. And just imagine you're eating 3 times a day or 2 times a day, or you're going out, and every time that was a trigger. So I learned how to, cope with those things. But
Wow. So I'm very intrigued by the concept of, not intrigued, it's heartbreaking, but eventually everyone loses their childhood. And for me, and from my experience, it's often a tumultuous way, whether it's or a traumatic way, a death in the family, whatever. And I'm always taken by people, and myself as well, but people like you lost your childhood at such an early age. I mean, my goodness, like that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. So what did you, I guess you played a lot of sports then, right?
I did. I got involved early, karate, because I was fighting, baseball, soccer early on, and baseball I excelled. And then you get that 12-year-old age that we were talking about, and my dad had never been around. He packed up his stuff one day and moved to Miami, and I decided at 12 years old that summer after Little League, I had this thing in my head where I was going to steal money from my mom, went into her pocketbook, got on a Greyhound bus, and went to Miami to find my dad at 12 years old.
Did you find him?
I did. I got to the Miami bus station and called my grandma, and my grandma got him to come pick me up. I was back home in Paulsboro in 24 hours.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, he did not want to. The moral of that story is I was back because he didn't want to have kids. That's why, he left. And within 2 weeks, I was drinking. I mean, I went from playing with GI Joes and collecting sports cards to drinking and hanging out with seniors and people that were first year out of high school. And within a month and a half, I had a fake ID. Within 2 months, I was dealing drugs, and within 2 years, I ended up in jail.
So wow. So you can you can pinpoint it to that moment, right? Then where your father shunned you, right? Is that what you're saying from that moment?
Absolutely. When I came back, it was like, looking back at that moment, it seemed like I really didn't care about too much coming back.
Yeah, man, I guess so. I mean, I could just imagine at that point, like, what more could you possibly? I could see feeling lost, right? Like all the garbage you've been through, and then you're in your head, you are probably thinking, well, this is going to fix everything. I'm going to go. My dad's going to take me, and everything's going to be good. And it was like you're almost like you're probably like your last ditch effort to try to save yourself. And then you
Right.
were done, and you came back and you make all these bad choices. So how old were you when you went to jail?
That was at the end of freshman year. Was hanging around the wrong people, doing the wrong things at the wrong places. Got into, like I said, I was dealing drugs, but we got into breaking and entering into houses and stealing things from people. And yeah, it was a lot. I got out of jail, and like a month later, they sent me to Scared Straight. A lot of people remember the Scared Straight program
Yeah, I
up at
remember that. Yeah.
Broadway State Prison. And a month after I got out, sent the Broadway, and that was an experience in itself.
It's also traumatic as well for a 14-year-old kid, I guess. How long were you in for?
It was like 3 weeks, but it felt like 2 months.
I'm sure it did.
A lot of people don't understand, and I teach and I tell the kids, and we've had kids that run into that, and I say, listen, people think they're tough. They think they're real tough, but then when that steel door shuts behind them,
oh my God,
it kind of reality sets in that you're locked up. Your freedoms have been taken away.
Man, that is an absolute primal fear of mine. Prison. I grew up scared to death of prison. I remember watching that Scared Straight thing as a kid and being scared to death just watching on TV, and you lived it, man.
Yeah, my problem with that whole thing is when I went, it was experience in itself. That's a whole nother podcast, but I was inspired, Mike. I was inspired. I was motivated, but I wasn't driven, because the minute I got off the bus, like, the inspiration and the motivation, that went away. You need to be driven by something, and it definitely didn't drive me in that moment.
That's interesting. I would love to. We won't have to get into it. I want to be under an hour, so I don't want to get. But I would love to get into the inspired but not driven thing. That's amazing. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit. I don't know. So when you come back, you go right back into the same practices, same habits, same crowd.
A little bit, but started to back off the dealing the drugs. I was experimenting with a little bit of drugs. I had smoked marijuana, was experimenting with LSD and mushrooms early on. I was dealing cocaine, and I had been making, we were on welfare. We didn't have money. We boiled our bathwater on a kerosene heater, man, and the bathtub was upstairs. So imagine bringing that stuff upstairs. And I had a ton of money, but getting out, when I got out of jail, that stuff kind of backed off easy. In sports and teachers really had a positive impact on my life. I started my freshman year playing football, and then I quit 3 days before the season was over. Wrestled, finished the season, but at one point I had walked away, came back, and baseball finished the season. But yeah, freshman year was not a very good year playing sports. Sophomore year, things picked up a little bit with every sport, and the impact that teachers were having on me.
It's amazing. I love to hear that, because that's another reason why I'm doing this podcast. People like that and yourself and these people need to be celebrated. Like these people, I don't know how many jobs there are in this world where everything you do, every word you say, except parent, but everything you do, every word you say, every action towards a young person has an impact. And teachers, it's a lot. That's a lot to carry. So that makes me happy that you had that, because clearly it saved your life.
Yeah, a lot of the things that teachers did back in the day, we can't do them today. I lived with my gym teacher, who was the wrestling coach, took me in his house. I lived with him during wrestling season. I used to tell people, hey, I'm living with him to cut weight. I was living with him so I could stay out of trouble. Lending me his car, the football coach lending me his car. Today, people, you can't even put a kid in your car today for good reason. But yes, there's a major impact. You can still do a lot of stuff as a teacher helping kids out.
Yep. But not that. Yeah, not to that extent. But in a town like Paulsboro, I grew up in Camden County, and I worked at Delsey for years. So I've I've seen quite a bit of that kind of pushing it for the sake of a kid. Like, what are you going to do? Kid's starving to death. You know what I mean? Like, you got to feed him. You got to go to his house or drive him home or save him. And it's tough. It's not easy. So what was your main sport in high school then?
I got a Division I scholarship for football. I was a half decent wrestler. Never reached my potential because of everything that was going on.
Yeah.
Baseball was my best sport. I felt like I was really good at, but it was so hard to be focused on what I was doing when I was doing it. Grades were horrible. I mean, I had a 1.0 GPA going into my junior year, 5.10 on the SAT.
Wow.
Yeah, I had some work to do. Listen, I had some work to do my junior, and I could not get lower than a B my junior and senior year. I had to get it to, back in the day, it was a 2.0 700.
Yeah, okay.
And I got a 5.10 on the SAT. Mike, you give me 500 points for putting your name on the test.
Yeah. That is amazing. But you were able to buckle down and get that, right? From your junior and senior year, you were able to.
It came down to the last SAT I took, and it came down to the last math exam I took on the last day. I mean, that's what it came down to. I mean, to be honest with you, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I'd be dead or in jail if I didn't end up getting up to Rutgers.
Wow. So you leave school and you get a scholarship, which is amazing. What position were you playing?
I got a defensive lineman, and I played right away my freshman year behind a guy that went to the NFL. I said, hey, I'm going to the NFL in 3 years. Wasn't focused on grades. Once again, I mean, I just wasn't a great student. But that was the goal. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to graduate from college. I'm just going to go to the NFL.
Were you still using like drinking and doing like smoking weed or anything at this point?
No, I didn't really. I smoked marijuana when I was in that 12 when all that stuff started, and I never really did it after that. I was just drinking all the time. I was out. I mean, that first time that I drank, Mike, when I was 12, instant alcoholic. I mean, it was like a connection because I couldn't stop. I knew something. There was a connection. I liked it.
Yeah.
And parents had an issue with different things, with different substances. It was the first sip, man. It was like, you're hooked.
Yeah. And for you, there was a huge, for most, probably every addict, there's a void you're trying to fill. And whether it's, if you're a gambling addict, you're gambling, you're a drug addict, you're doing drugs, sex addict, whatever, like you're trying to fill a void. And that thing that calmed you or made you feel a certain kind of way. And and you were just predisposed to it apparently too, because of your family and everything else.
Yeah, it was, high school, that was a big problem because I drank sometimes at lunchtime and went back to school and, went to school hungover. So that was every time that I had gotten in trouble, every time the common denominator was there was drinking going on. I never got in trouble. I never got in trouble in my life not drinking.
Interesting. So was it a problem for you in college though, the drinking?
Yeah, I got a DWI my sophomore year. My sophomore year coming back, I was starting and I tore my knee up, blew everything out, every ligament, 3 days before the first game, had surgery, and I was struggling big time with the injury because I'm like, all right, ain't going to the NFL, grades suck, and homecoming, drinking, supposed to be at the game, but I'm an alcoholic, so I'm drinking. I wasn't playing. I was redshirting, but I was supposed to be at the game. Didn't go to the game. I went to the bar at 6 o'clock in the morning, and like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, got a DWI, and almost got kicked off the team. They kept me. I mean, it wasn't in the news. They were just like, when they sent me to counseling. Technically suspended me from the team, but I was already not playing because I was rehabbing. But yeah, that was a big problem.
So you did end up clearly graduating from Rutgers. Did you play? Did you play again? Was your career? Did your football career end because of your knee or anything?
Then I came back and finished up, started the last 3 seasons. I ended up, my senior year, ended up 305-pound defensive tackle. I put on a lot of weight at the end of the last year. I ended up wrestling too, playing two Division I sports.
Wow. I didn't realize that. Wow. Um, so you graduate from Rutgers. Did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
No, because my senior year at Rutgers, I go out one night with guys this is when I started doing cocaine. Went out, was on break, went out with some people that I knew did cocaine, and went out with them, and I didn't need to be pushed to do it. It was my intent to go out that night and do it. And as soon as I did one line of cocaine, I was hooked, man. Like from the first line, it was like same as the alcohol. It was like I knew at that moment, not looking back, I was like I had that addictive gene, man.
Yeah. And now, it's funny because now that's, you want to be one of your goals is to be the oldest ever Ironman triathlete. I saw that on one of your videos. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, this is your new, like, that addictive gene is now serving that, you love competing and performing. And, let me go back. I'm sorry. So you got addicted to cocaine in college, you're saying?
I did start that in college, correct. Senior year.
And then what did you do when you graduated?
I was homeless. I didn't have a place to go, and for the second time in my life, and
wow.
One of my coaches took me in. He was like, "You're graduating?" I'm like, "Yeah, man." I was like, "Well, I ain't got a place to live." He's like, "Yeah, you do. You're gonna come live with me." And
one of your coaches from Paulsboro, or one of your football coaches from? Oh, okay.
One of my coaches from Paulsboro. So I lived with the wrestling coach during high school, and then Coach Farrow, his name is. He took me in when I graduated from Rutgers. Started working, doing some construction stuff, and then really was like looking into being a teacher. I had taken enough classes at Rutgers to be a teacher, and started to pursue that.
But you were still addicted to cocaine at that point.
I was an alcoholic and drug addict. I like full blown struggling with that. It was a struggle, man.
Wow. So how much later do you start? I guess teaching your only profession right now? Like the only thing you've done professionally?
Yeah, professional. I mean, I did construction. I was working 5 different jobs when I started teaching, but since September of 2002, I've taught. I mean, I own my own speaking business, motivational speaking business. But yeah, I've coached sports as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been teaching for 20 some years then, and you teach history, correct?
Correct. Special ed history. Yeah.
Special ed history. That's what Danielle said. Okay. And that's kind of what I want to get into. So when you start, how long into your career before you get clean? Like you start teaching in 2002, and you're alcoholic and drug addict. When do you get clean?
So in November of 2007, I went up for a Rutgers football game and went up with some people. We were, drinking and doing drugs all day. And we stayed at a hotel, coincidentally, where I stayed on my recruiting visit for Rutgers when I got a scholarship. We're at the same hotel all day long, drinking and drugs, go back to the hotel. And at the end of the night, next thing you know, I'm waking up in the hospital. And I didn't really know what was going on because I blacked out. They said that I got to the roof of the Hyatt Regency and was ready to jump off, commit suicide. So that was the second time that there was a suicide attempt my senior year in high school. I had driven a car into a telephone pole because I was struggling with a lot of different things in high school, and I had a scholarship coming, and I didn't know what was going on. So it was the second time of this, so that kind of scared the hell out of me because I knew it was real, but I didn't remember doing it. But I know it was real. They had it on camera. Um, like
Wow.
a month later, Mike, I'm in my apartment. I lived a block away from Glassboro High School, and I take off of school on Friday. We're doing cocaine, crystal meth with a bunch of people, and we're on this like 4-day bender. And in my living room, ESPN's on the TV, and this special comes on TV. This guy doing an Ironman, and they're telling this story of this kid who ran away when he was 12, got DWIs. I have two of them. Found the Ironman, did the Ironman, and turned his life around. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm doing Ironman. And everybody looked at me like, you can't even walk up the steps without sweating. And they were right. I was
You were
out of
still
shape.
heavy then from
Oh
from
yeah,
from college. Yeah.
I was, but obviously, the drugs at that point in December of 2007, I was probably within a year of things being finished, like me being dead, because we were
Really?
doing correct, because I was drinking all the time. I was doing cocaine a lot. And then we started doing crystal meth, and that was a whole different thing. It's a nasty, they're all nasty drugs, but that was just, things started getting worse to where we're doing large, large amounts of cocaine. And I could tell my body was, I knew physically that my body was like deteriorating from the inside. I just felt it. Like I knew my heart, I was sweating getting out of bed in the morning. And I just knew something was going to give sooner or later. And I see this special on the TV, man. And in that moment, it was just like one of these things where those people were in that room. Some of them are dead today, and the other people are still doing what they're doing. And I took this mission of, I'm going to start swimming. I'm going to start running. I'm going to start biking. I'm going to get myself a bike, and I'm going to do an Ironman, and I'm changing my life around.
Wow. So Mike, that is an amazing story. First of all, um, how long from that moment till you get clean?
After that day, I didn't do any more drugs. After
You
that
just
day,
stopped.
I just stopped. I white knuckled it, and people were like, "How the hell did you do that?" I'm like, "Listen, we get back to that thing where I tell people, you get inspired." I was inspired by this guy. His name was Todd Crandell. I actually met him in Puerto Rico at an Ironman race, and I was motivated by his story. But I had this drive, man, this drive that got my ass up in the morning and was like, "You're gonna either do this or you're gonna end up fucking dying. You're one or the other. Like, you're gonna either die or you're gonna do this." And Mike, I seriously wanted my life back. That was the drive. I was like, I can do this, but I gotta be consistent. I gotta have relentless pursuit. I gotta be resilient, and I gotta put in sweat equity, or it's not gonna happen.
It's interesting because I'm so I'm in awe of that story. I really am. Um, to the point where I'm actually emotional thinking about it, because you, at that moment, somehow or another, in your early 30s, maybe,
Yeah, it was
like,
like 30. It was 32 because it was
yeah, like
2000, and yeah.
you came to the realization that all you had was you. Like, that's all I can think of, and that's hard. Like, that's hard for most people to come to grips with. They're always thinking about, if I just had met this person, or if I just had that. You looked in the mirror and said, that drive came because you wanted your life back. And it's like, you knew the only thing that all you had was you and that drive. Nobody else is going to
That
do it for you. Right. And
Now
it's
started eliminating things. And I tell people all the time, and I do it till this day. I eliminate problems. I became, I got the saying, "Don't be a victim of your environment, be a product of your decisions." I was I was I was a problem because of what I was doing and the people I was hanging around with, but I also became the person that people shouldn't have been hanging around with me. So
Mhm.
I said, this is what I got to do. I said, I have to eliminate everybody. Everybody. You're not hanging out with nobody. You're not doing nothing. This is what you're doing. And when I got into this, it was like all the way in.
Wow. So how long after that do you run your first race?
Did my first race. It was a Rowan, I believe, 10 miler in February. And then things just took off from there. You know?
Wow. Wow. Okay. So you were clean by then. You're now teaching. I want to get into what it's like for you as a teacher, because clearly this is my thing. Those of us that work with young people and are constantly facing their own garbage, right? They're constantly seeing their own trauma from in the young people in front of them.
Correct.
Does that have an impact on you, do you think?
Yes, because there have been things that happened. I'm trying to not bring other people into this. There have been things that happened at school that I'm like, damn, man, that's a trigger for me. And you're like, you want things to work out well for those kids because you were in that same situation.
Yeah. And it's tough. Do you like counsel kids a lot? Do you find yourself, are you involved in like the anti-drug thing or anything at school? Or are you just with teaching and coaching is your main connection to young people?
I don't coach anymore. I stopped coaching when I decided to do the Iron. I dropped everything, man. I stopped coaching. I retired from girls track. It was hard enough being an alcoholic and drug addict and coaching. I mean, Christ, that was just absolutely crazy. But I retired from coaching and just got into that. But I did start a leadership development club. Matter of fact, the first time I ever spoke was at Delsey, to the baseball team, Joe Smith. Yeah. And when I spoke to his team, I left and I was driving home, and I was like, damn, man. I said, I didn't really lay it all out there. I was actually disappointed because I felt like I didn't share everything that I felt like I needed to be sharing. And I made that point where I was like, you know what? If I'm going to tell my story, I'm just going to tell my story and not really worry about what everybody else is thinking, because here's the moral of the story. Every time that I've spoken and every time I go play, as many kids come up to me and talk to me, I get emails from teachers, from principals, from nurses, from resource officers that say, hey, man, I had a problem with that too, or I got a problem with that too. What do you think I should do? What do you recommend? So I do run a leadership development club. I've been doing that since 2016. So I enjoy that. So that's the extra thing that I do now at school. I tell kids I'm not a counselor. And when I do tell my story at Glassboro, they usually ask me to speak every year to the freshman class coming in. And kids will ask me different things, and I'm just honest with them. And sometimes people don't like hearing honest stuff because you have to tell kids, or even adults. You have to tell them the reality of different things.
Yeah, man, and you walk the walk. My goodness. So I wanted to ask you about something because you mentioned your childhood and everything. Stuff was in your family, and it's something that I've been more intrigued with recently, and I'm very curious about it. And it's this idea of intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you? What do you know about it? Because I'm on kind of a quest to learn more about it.
Yeah, I've spoken on it. I spoke to a child abuse thing in California on intergenerational trauma. Listen, both so for intergenerational trauma, let me just go back to the ACEs here. When you have three ACEs of, it doesn't matter what it is: sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, physical and emotional, living in a house with an alcoholic, drugs, someone's been to jail, all these different things. When you have three of them, you're going to have a kid, or you're going to, if you experience those as a kid, you're going to have problems getting to school, problems with grades, some behavior things. Once you hit 6 of the 10, it doesn't matter which ones. That's what's crazy, is it doesn't matter what 6. You are looking at a short life. Your life expectancy is going to be shorter by 20 years. you're looking at cancer, liver disease, heart disease, because when you get to 6, you're also likely to be doing drugs and drinking, which are messing up those organs. When people pass these things on to their kids, right, this becomes intergenerational trauma, where if that next generation can't stop it, it's just going to keep on going on and on and on. The kid that sees his mom being beat,
Yeah.
I had that problem early on. I had an issue with relationships, and specifically with women as a little kid, to where, Christ, Mike, people know you shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, but then you end up, like I said, being a victim of your environment and not a product of your decisions. And that's where the intergenerational trauma comes in, of people not getting help. They're not getting help early on. Kids aren't getting it, and it's a shame, because that's where you got to stop it, right? You break the chain from the kid. The kid's got to break that chain growing up, or that adult now that had it happen to them, and then the adult has kids. They got to teach the kids these things.
Yeah, it's a lot. That's a lot.
But I do know that, from personal experience, if parents are doing drugs, that kid is born with that trait, man.
Yeah.
You don't know when it's going to get turned on. It can get turned on by many things, but mine got turned on that first sip of alcohol. Mine got turned on when I did that first line of cocaine, and that became my problem with intergenerational trauma.
So I'm curious about you. You make this decision to get yourself physically, to do some physically demanding things, and you were driven to do it, but clearly you were also driven. It wasn't just about physicality, right? It was clearly about your mental health and your emotional health as well. So you can train for a marathon and a triathlon, and that's going to help your body. What did you do for your brain and your emotional well-being and your mental well-being? Right.
Well, I'm big into mindfulness. Nowadays, I was in a cold tub earlier. That is something that is very beneficial to me. They say, and you talk about drugs, Jesus, they say when you do cocaine, you get that dopamine hit for like 9 minutes. If you get in the ice tub in the morning, you have that dopamine hit for 9 hours, 8 hours. It's really crazy. But I do get something out of that. But when this stuff happened, in 2008, and I made this change, white knuckling, the drinking problem and the drug problem, the mental stuff came last, because it wasn't until, I had met my ex-wife in 2011, was racing at the time. My goal was to make it to the World Championships in half Ironman and full Ironman. And I was very, very close to getting there. Ended up having a back surgery in 2012, but I was really into the physical part of it. Had the back surgery, and then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do these races for long, but your physical ability, you can get injured and then you're done. You can be rich and then someone can take all your money, or you lose it all and then you're done. But your mind is the one thing you have for the rest of your life. I started getting into these things where, I was just started to be more mindful of what I was doing.
Did you ever go to counseling or anything like that? Or did
you
go to
I did on my own. When I said, like you said, when did you start working on yourself? Right around 2016, I said to myself, I'm telling people to talk to people, because you tell people communicate. When there's a void in communication, that void gets filled with negativity. I'm telling people that, but I wasn't doing it. And I had a problem with that. I had a problem with me telling people to do things and I wasn't doing them. So it was almost instantly that I got it, because this was around 2016, spoke to Delphi 2016. It's almost instantly that I got myself into counseling. And I've been doing it ever since.
You still go? You still do counseling?
I'll do it all the time. And a guy will tell me, you sure you want to do like in 2 weeks? You want to do a month? I'm like, nah, 2 weeks. I made a commitment to myself. Like, I'm not there's no, Mike, negotiating with, like, there's no negotiating in my brain about therapy. It's just going to be happening till I'm dead.
And you've seen since 2016, it's had a pretty big impact on you.
Yeah, because I was holding all that. I held, Mike, everything in. I never told anybody about anything until 2011. I start turning my life around in 2008, but 2011, I met this woman, and I wasn't really concerned with, I was dating, but I was just concerned with making it to the world championships and racing. And then I wanted to get into ultras and these different things, and met this woman. And I said a month in, I said, if I am not going to be able to hold a relationship if I do not tell this woman my story. So sat down on the couch. We were a month in because I met her on October 18th of 2011. The thing that really sparked me was that first week in November, man, that year, that Jerry Sandusky thing came out at Penn State, and I was rattled. I was like, I was shooken, and it was such a goddamn big trigger to me that I was like, gotta say something. I have to tell her. So I sat down on the couch with her, and I said, hey, I gotta tell you something. And I told her what I'm telling you. And she said, she said one of the most powerful things you can say to anybody. And she said, Mike, you're not that person anymore. And it was like almost like an anvil getting off my chest, to where I had to figure out that I was not that 12-year-old kid no more. I was somebody that's, older and adult, and it's okay to have those things happen, but you got to communicate. I felt so good communicating. And from there, from there, that was a positive thing. I think telling just one person was a good thing.
Let me ask you a question about that, because this is something I'm also curious about. I'm big into mindfulness as well, and I became a dad very late in life. I have a 5-year-old little girl, and my life right now has all the purpose I need, and I understand the only thing that matters is right this moment. Right? It's all you have. It's a gift and everything. And that's what people will say. It's all about being mindful and present, and I meditate, I do all these things. But I still know that trauma-riddled kid is who I was, and also made me who I am. So I guess I'm curious about, for you, she says you're not that guy anymore, you're not that kid anymore. But how do we balance that? How do we balance living now and saying none of that matters because it's not real anymore, but also honoring it and going, it made me who I am. Does that question make sense? Like,
absolutely. I was thinking that today when I'm driving my car, and every time I do drive it, they got this big ass mirror or big ass window in front of me, and this tiny little goddamn mirror in the back. And I'm like, and I always know this, and I tell people there's a reason why that mirror or the window is so big and the mirror is so small. You want to look at everything in front of you, but do not forget where you came from and these things that happened to you, because they can happen again. I know that if I relapse, I had 2 situations where I had 2 setbacks. I went down to Lake City. It was went down to Lake City and had two setbacks. And I said, I got to eliminate that problem, but you got to know where you're from, man. You got to know, like, I know if I drink, I know I got to be able to look in that mirror and be like, that's what's going to happen. That guy back there is going to come back, and that's going to be a problem. You have to, while I'm not that person anymore, absolutely got to be mindful. You have to be mindful of where you're from, what you've been through, what's going to trigger you, what's not going to trigger you. If you're triggered, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So that's the big thing with me, is not forgetting those things that happen, because you don't want them to happen again. And listen, I ain't going to all of a sudden not be an alcoholic or not be a drug addict or not be a kid that was, sexually abused and had all these crappy things happen and have to stab his, stepdad in the back to get him off the mom. Those things are always going to be there.
And it's interesting because that goes back to that saying you said, don't be a victim of your environment. So like your environment is going to be what it is. You can be a victim of it. It's always, but be the product of your decisions. Is that, I get that right? So all you can do is make the best decision now, and don't be a victim of what you came from. Yeah, you're always going to have come from that, but you don't have to be a victim of it. It's kind of what you're saying.
And you got to know, like, my girlfriend said, hey, we're going to this thing. Or is it okay if I bring a couple drinks? Absolutely. You can bring a couple drinks. I'm just not going to drink them, but you have to understand, you can't be an alcoholic or a drug addict and not realize that you're going to be in some place you might be. You have no idea you never know what bathroom you're going to walk in at some place and somebody's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, and that triggers your ass. Of course, you don't want to be at a place or a house where those things are going on, but people are going to drink. And I had to come to that realization because for a while, Mike, I was struggling with that. I was like, hey, I can't go to these places because of X, Y, and Z. I had to learn that it's okay to go to those places. You're just not doing that.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna close out now, and I want to end with two things. I end all my episodes by asking my guests what they would say to them 12-year-old selves now, with all the knowledge they have, that would kind of like that you wish somebody had told you. But then after that, I want to ask you, Mike, the teacher, the addict, the triathlete, whatever. What's some advice we can give to people that work with young people to help them begin healing way before you and I did in our lives? So let's start with what you would say to your 12-year-old self.
I'd say to that kid in the Little League picture, number one, don't steal money from your mom and get on that bus, man, because it's not going to matter. I like saying, when things pop up, 3 things. Does it matter? It's not going to matter. Like, don't get on the bus and don't run away, because the only thing that's going to happen is bad stuff. And if you have relentless pursuit, resilience, and you put in sweat equity, you're going to be able to do whatever you want in this world, from playing in the NFL or wrestling or baseball or whatever it might be. Even though triathlon wasn't on the radar, now it is. I would tell that kid, hey, you will make it to the world championships one day in Ironman racing, which I did this past couple of years. It was always a goal of mine. But
that's amazing.
I would tell that kid, don't throw your life away. Don't kill yourself over some stupid stuff. Don't harm yourself, because you're going to meet amazing teachers. You're going to have amazing people come into your life that are going to teach you lessons. They're going to add value to you. You're going to fail, but you're going to fail moving forward. And that's where you learn the lessons. If you're not failing, then you're not. And I would tell him to put himself in uncomfortable situations. Become comfortable being uncomfortable. And then you're going to be able to grow.
Can I ask you a question for personally? What does that mean to you? Like, how is that something you learned? Like, what can you give me some examples of, for you, how that came about? This being comfortable, being uncomfortable.
When I got into triathlon, I couldn't even swim across the pool, and it was a challenge to me. I had never ran longer than a 5K, never rode a bike. Like, I thought I could ride a bike. I couldn't ride a bike. Like, riding a bike in a race is different, man. And it was very uncomfortable for me to do those things and to race at that level, to where I'm at now, where, my goal is to be one of the best in the world, not just in Gloucester County or New Jersey. I want to be the best in the world. I kind of hit the reset button with a divorce and all these different things, but I have to be able to challenge myself. And, I always talk to people and I ask them what their goals are, and like, well, I want to do this. And I'm like, you got to dream bigger, man. You got to dream bigger. You got to put yourself in tough situations, because if it's not a challenge, you're probably not having the right goals, because you got to be doing something tough. And there's always a starting point, but you got to put yourself, like when I'm training, I put myself in situations that are tough. I got in the ice tub earlier. I haven't had it in a while, and I bought a new tub, and I said, you're staying in here. As soon as I got in, I wanted to get out. And I said, you're staying in here, because I knew that's where I was going to grow. And you become uncomfortable with that.
Yep.
So the next time you go and do something, that's easy. I put it in my brain. It's like a computer chip that's in there, and I say, I've been here before. And then you just start raising that level of being uncomfortable, and you just keep going to where things that were once uncomfortable to you are no longer uncomfortable. And I'm not even talking just about the physical part. I have a little bit of social anxiety getting up in front of to speak to people. And I'm like, you got to be able to add value to people. If you never tell your story, no one's going to get nothing out of it.
Wow. So what's some advice we'll end with this. Anybody who works with young people today, or parents, teachers, whatever, anyone I say serves young people because that's what we do. What can we do for them to help them start their healing journey earlier in their lives than you and I did?
For their kids or for themselves?
If they had the opportunity to talk to a kid in front of them.
Right.
So what are we doing for young people to help them heal, help them start that healing that we both talk about, but that started later in life? What can we say to them what can we help? What advice can we give to the adults to offer to the children?
I would make sure that there's communication going on. I know for a fact today, a lot of parents do not talk to their kids about different things, period. Mm-hmm. And I get back to that thing of communicate. When there's avoidant communication, that void gets filled with negativity. Sometimes it's drinking, sometimes it's drugs, sometimes it's a young kid having sex, sometimes it's bad grades, not showing up to school, acting out. Make sure you're communicating and asking the right questions. Know where your kids are at. Know who your kids are know who your kids hang out with, but also know the parents. Invite them over. Have kids at your house instead of saying, oh, go outside and play. Have them in your house so you know what type of kids your kid is hanging around with. And then if they experienced anything, if you're a single parent mom, single parent dad, and you went through a divorce, there should be some type of counseling going on. There has to be. And if there's not, then that's a problem, because I'm telling you right now, as a teacher, I hear it from kids. Your kids, if you're listening, single parent mom, single parent dad, your kids come into school and talk about how you talk nasty about the other one. They overhear these things and it bothers them. I know it does because the kids talk about it. So be careful what you say in front of your kids. But know what your kids are doing, where they're at, know what's going on in the classroom, know who their teachers are, follow their grades. And at the end of the day, make sure you tell your kids you love them. People don't say that these days. Mm-mm. It's a simple thing. I love you. I mean, you're talking to a person here. I didn't hear that shit when I was growing up.
Neither did I, bro.
You don't hear it. And I was telling my girlfriend that word means something. It means something. So if you're going to say it, you mean it. But it's also something, in a household, it should be Valentine's Day every day.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to end it there, Mike. That was amazing. And I just want to end by saying I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I'm glad you came out on the other end of it. And I'm glad for everybody that you have reached with your story. And I hope you continue to get larger and larger audiences, man. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, Mike. And if you ever need anything, let me know, man. I'll help you out.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Once again, thanks so much to Mike Belh for joining the show. You can find all of his information, including his socials and his website, in the show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe or rate the show or leave a comment or a review. Share with your friends. Anything that can get us to more ears would be greatly appreciated. Your 12-Year-Old Self is a Fairmount Media production, and it's hosted, written, and produced by me, Mike Nicholson. Questions, comments, guest suggestions can be emailed to your12yearoldself@gmail.com. That's your 12-year-old self with the number 12 at gmail.com. The theme song is Never a Worthless Moon by Yawns. Logo design by Rose Bear Arts. Digital marketing consulting by Krista Lemon. Social media consulting by Jessica Hawk. Special thanks to Ron Cornwall and Sarah Finney. And my profound gratitude goes out to my wife, Courtney.